This episode is sponsored by the Bridge to Recovery, a nonprofit program on 115 acres near Bowling Green, Kentucky, a tranquil place where they've been changing lives for over 40 years. Their people improve their quality of life by acknowledging past emotional wounds and healing from all forms of trauma. The CEO, Paul Hamlin, has been a friend of mine for 20 years. Call him directly at 858-945-7848. That's 858-945-7848. Or you can learn more about the Bridge to Recovery by clicking the link in the show notes or visiting thebridgetorecovery.com. Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
I'm Tyson Stark, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
Thanks for listening to the show. I'm Tom Gentry. This episode's with a friend of mine named Tyson Stark. So, back in 2010, I took a job with a nonprofit addiction treatment provider in Middle Tennessee. And, they had a lot of great programs, still do. But at the time, there was this pet project that the CEO had. And when I went to work there in the spring of 2010, it had just opened 6 or 8 months prior. And they called it Stillwaters. If you've listened to the show, I've worked in the addiction treatment field for a long time. I've been sober for a long time. I got sober as a young man. And I've just never seen another program that so systematically helped young men stay clean and sober like Stillwaters has. And, after I got there and kind of realized what was going on at Stillwaters and got to know the people there, man, I was just so proud to be a part of it and to be able to help avail people of the services there. And I would just watch guys, one after one, come out of that place with a sense of belonging, their heads held high, proud of the work that they had done there. And I had many conversations with the director there about what that experience amounted to for these guys. And if you know me, I'm really interested in men's issues. And I feel like one of the deficiencies in our culture is that we don't have a rite of passage for men to transition from boyhood into manhood. It's this ambiguous line. And I think as a result, I know I can speak for myself and I know a lot of other guys who would say the same, that, they can be well into manhood and in a lot of ways still feel like a little boy. And I think to me, that's because there's almost never a rite of passage welcoming boys into manhood. And in other cultures that exists. And I have seen this at Stillwaters. It amounts to a rite of passage. These guys, it's like they go to war together, and they come out proud with a sense of purpose. So, I've just been a big fan of it all along. I love the people there. And of all these guys who I've seen come out of there and do really, really well and go on to help a lot of other people and do a lot of good, Tyson Stark's one of those guys. And I've watched him. We talk about it a little bit here in the episode. I've just watched him and his ascent, coming from someone who kind of couldn't figure it out and was lost to, the next thing you know, I see him and he's remaining sober, and the next thing you know, he's working there at Stillwater's, and as I moved on and to other things in my career, he ardmore up in his career, in that organization, and very recently left, and he went and started this program called Ardmore, with the experience that he garnered from his time and his work at Stillwater's and his experience in the field of addiction treatment. So I've been able to kind of from afar just watch this unfold on social media, and I felt really, really proud of him that he has followed his path, that he's seen a vision. He and his partner, came up with this plan to open this place, and they've carried it out. And there's just no doubt in my mind that they're doing great things there already, having just opened, and that they're going to help a lot of people. And I know Tyson well enough to feel really good about sending guys there. And I've tried to do it a couple times already. Haven't made one stick yet, but I wanted to help him spread the word. So we had a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Tyson Stark.
Just the product of some bad seeds.
Tyson, how you doing?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
I'm happy to have you. So, I wanted to have you on here to talk about what you're doing and this facility you've created. Tell me about that.
So we literally built a place in Savannah, Georgia, just on the outskirts, in a forest, more or less, very secluded, very quiet. We stumbled across this property after a lot of failed attempts of trying to start something. And as soon as I walked in on the property, I knew this is the place. It has that feel to it. Mm-hmm. And so what we tried to create is, we didn't try to reinvent the wheel. We had people that came before us that showed us the way, that we thought we could be, basically expand the services that were being offered in the immersion place. And so it's a 12-step immersion retreat for men. And our primary purpose is to create an environment through the groups, through the setting, through the daily activity, where typically guys that have been around, they've been to multiple treatment settings, can rest, breathe for a minute, and try to enlarge their spiritual life. And that's really, if I was to put it all in one sentence, it would be, we created a place for men to enlarge their spiritual life. And that can be, as you probably know, there's all sorts of ways and techniques and moves and experiences to do that. Mm-hmm. But that's ultimately what we did, I don't know how important the details of it are. It's designed to be at least 60 days, mm-hmm. And stay really as long as necessary.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I've noticed over the years more and more there's this niche in the addiction treatment industry for, who can help those guys who've been to 10 different places. Mm-hmm. And it's not just, there are plenty of places that can take them again, but where are they going to go where it becomes, this is when my new life starts.
And you see it, the guys that are coming here are guys that could sit in a center and run a group.
Yes.
They have done so much. They can finish your sentences if you try to get into really basic 101 treatment stuff. So a place for them to land that is so different in how they're treated that it almost like disables some of the defense mechanisms of the disease of addiction.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm so used to challenging authority. Like, there's not really going to be authority here. You know, we're not going to get into that battle with you.
Yeah. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So why don't you like talk about how'd you get here? Where, you know,
yeah, sure.
Start from the beginning, man.
Yeah. So, how I ended up in Savannah, Georgia. I'm sitting here right now at the center thinking to myself, how the heck did I land here? It's never in the cards for me.
Yeah.
You know, I had a really great upbringing, you know, a pretty traditional what we're seeing today as far as the milieu, it's a cookie cutter type of deal, you know, middle class family, good education. And I had that feeling that a lot of these guys have where I just don't quite fit in and I don't know why or where. There's something, I describe it, I'm parroting it, that it's like people have this instruction manual for life and mine just missing chapters or pages. And it would always feel like I knew part of the beginning and part of the end, but I never knew how to get there. And I bounced around and I did pretty well. You know, I lived my life, what I would say pretty successfully. I was good in school. I had a lot of friends. I played a lot of sports. There was no giant red flags for me going through my upbringing until I got sober and look back and be like, oh yeah, that was a red flag.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, those feelings that I have today, I have felt those back then.
Right.
But at the time it didn't really register. And, as the story goes, you know, I went to college and found beer and I was good at it. And it was college. It was a phase, you know, it was like, this is what we do. I went to school in the Midwest and it was just kind of the deal. And then my friends that I drank with, they seemed to phase out and I kept going.
Yeah,
and
I know.
And I was looking around and I was like, well, wait a minute. All my friends are gone, but I'm still going to the same college bars, you know?
Right.
So I did what any good alcoholic would do is I got a job bartending. And being a college student with very little money and all of a sudden having a job at a bar where not only am I getting paid cash every night, but suddenly the feeling that was even better than alcohol for me was standing behind that bar and having all these people need me and want me. I would have the keys to the liquor behind me, but ultimately everyone wanted to be my friend because if you knew me, you got served faster. It was college bars, so you know how that is.
Right.
And I thought I had found my calling, you know, I was like, I'm just going to be a bartender forever.
I found my calling.
You know? Yeah, this is it. Like, this is awesome. I'm really good at 2-3 minute conversations. Don't get too deep. I can just have this quick kind of come and go. I always have something to do, right? There's always a customer to serve or something like that. So I never really had to really engage with people very long. And I always had the alcohol there. And so, you know, that was kind of the beginning of my 20s. And it went through all the way up to at the point where I was managing bars. And it started to become a job. It was very adult. You know, it was a salary job. I had an apartment. I had, you know, I kind of decided that, hey, listen, you know, college probably isn't for me. I'm making too much money. And this really interesting thing happened. And this is in the Midwest. This is in Ohio. And it's in the like mid 2000s. So right before this opiate epidemic really exploded. And I had fallen at work. I slipped on some wet tile and didn't think anything of it, just kind of brushed it off. And a couple of days later, my back was still hurting. And one of the women that work in the HR department said, you know, you should go to a doctor. You know, it's a work incident. So I went there and he gave me a bottle full of pills. And he said, take these. And I had limited exposure to that stuff. I didn't really know any different. But when I started that process, when I took those pills, at this point I was drinking very regularly. But I took those pills and something happened. I was like, this is great. This is better than it's like, I feel like the same kind of feeling of euphoria I get from alcohol, but without all the consequences with DUIs and the showing up work with alcohol in my breath and all those things. that you fast forward in a matter of about 18 months, I had lost my job. I had lost my apartment. I had lost pretty much every dollar I had. I borrowed from Peter to pay Paul, and I had credit cards maxed out, and my life was just utter chaos. And I did the only thing I knew what to do is I went to go check on my parents, see how they're doing. Hey, my life's in shambles. Let me wreck yours.
Oh boy.
Long story short, I ended up at 28 years old living in my parents' basement, which is, again, it's my story. It sounds really unique to me, but the longer I work in this treatment industry, the more I see this exact scenario.
Oh yeah.
I think, I could be considered failure to launch. I think the term we use now is emerging adult, but that's ultimately what I was.
Yeah.
I was a college dropout, nowhere to go, couldn't fight my way out of a paper bag. So one thing led to another, and, this is the typical story. My tolerance went up. The pills were not, I wasn't able to keep up with it. And I had to find cheaper and more effective ways, which ultimately led me to IV use. That was the most effective method.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still living in my parents' basement, hiding this whole thing. And this is a middle class family that, like I said, this was not in the cards for me. It wasn't supposed to be this way.
Right.
And you do that stuff one day at a time, and you're going to end up either in jail, in an institution, or dead. And luckily for me, I didn't end up dead. I had some scrapes with the law, but it ultimately landed me in a treatment center. And I was a model student in treatment. I showed up everywhere on time. I was an active participant in the treatment program. I secretly knew the whole entire time that I probably wasn't going to do this. The talking was nice. It was comfortable to be there. People seemed happy, but this really wasn't for me. And so that's a cycle. And I ended up in 6 treatment centers over the course of about 2 years. Just in and out, in and out, in and out. The disease is progressive in nature. So those little stints I had out were shorter and shorter before I got into so much trouble or so much, my health was so bad that I had to crawl back into a treatment center.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's kind of funny, going to treatment that many times in a short amount of time. For those 2 years, I think about 18 or 19 months of it, I was abstinent from drugs and alcohol because I spent all that time in treatment. What I learned from that process was that, what I started to get to is I can't stay sober outside of a center.
Yeah.
I have to stay here. And that is, it starts to bring up all sorts of things. At this point, I'm now 30 years old, and I'm not where I thought I should be. When you take the drugs and the alcohol away, I can't stop that thinking that comes up. That is just devastating. There's nothing that anybody could say to me that was worse than what I say to myself.
Right.
You can't hack it. You're never going to make it. And when I'm in that realm and I'm in that place, you're in that place of shame, some really terrible ideas start to come up. You start to give yourself excuses for really bad behavior. You start considering taking your own life and all those kinds of things. And I ended up at a center. And in this center, there were men in there that acted different and talked differently. At least I heard them differently than the places I had been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always I felt like I was always coddled. I don't think they explicitly said this in the other treatment experiences, but I always felt like people were saying, you know what, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. I'm pretty sure that's not what they said, but that's what I heard. That's what I felt. When I went to this other center, I'm going to bring the center up. Is that okay? It's called Stillwaters.
Of course.
That was, Stillwaters was the defining moment in my life that really was the catalyst of changing my entire life. And specifically the men that worked there. Mm-hmm. And so these guys sat across from me, and they didn't treat me like they were superior. They treated me as though they were just further along in their recovery than I was. They treated me like a newcomer in a 12-step meeting.
Right.
And they said things that were tough to hear. I don't know who told you that everything's going to be okay, but everything's not okay. Like, you're in a bad spot.
Right.
And for somebody that was so good at moving and shaking and shucking and jiving, these guys have already seen that game before. Not only had they already seen it, they had already done it themselves in their lives.
Right.
So they saw me coming a mile away with all my little creative ways of manipulation and how I excelled in treatment and all these little, I mean, it would be hard to describe all of it in this short amount of time, but I would say there were some men that sat there with me, and I'll give you an example. This is probably the best example I can think of. I, like a good person, like a good drug addict, alcoholic that's been in multiple treatments, I smuggled my phone in, you know, in this place, there's very little cell service.
That's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, but I smuggled it in. And at night I found this spot that that had like one bar of cell service. And of course I had a rehab
like
romance.
38 acres of land, and you found the 1 square foot where.
Yeah, I'm like upstairs holding my phone up in the air in the dark, getting this one bar.
Yeah.
To text this girl who I don't even remember her name. We only knew each other for a couple of days in detox, the rehab romance, you know?
Yeah. And
that was my outlet, because I was in this place of being in treatment yet again. And every time it gets worse, right? Because you can only keep that negative self-talk at bay for so long.
Mm. And
then it just explodes on you. And so I had to find an outlet. I didn't have drugs or alcohol, so I went to the next best thing, the 5'5" blonde-headed Lortab.
Mm-hmm.
And I got called out. I got, caught more or less. But one of the guys, the brothers in the program, so one of the other clients there, brought it up in group. Like, hey, man, like, we don't think you should have your phone. And the counselor, I'll never forget this. The counselor just kind of looked at me and he said, you know what? He's like, I'm not going to take your phone. He's like, you're an adult, but like, when is enough going to be enough? Like, when are you going to just stop playing this game? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, oh man, these guys have no idea. I got my phone. They're going to let me keep it. And by the next morning, I went up and handed my phone in.
Mm-hmm.
And he had communicated with me in a way that was so different than what I had experienced before, because it was always me versus them. And it was always trying to figure out a way to circumvent the authorities. And he spoke to me, and he spoke to me more than just logically and intellectually in my head. He spoke to my heart, and he spoke to me in a way that caused me to ask that question: when is it going to be different?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when are you going to stop? And that started this journey. They suggested that I do things that were no different than what had been suggested to me in the past. I just believed these guys.
Yeah.
Because they were doing it. They were sharing their experience and strength and hope with me. It wasn't theoretical to them. This wasn't like, we think if you do these things, you're going to get well. They're like, we know if you do this, you'll get well.
Right.
And by God, I did. And it was, just like any recovery story, it was tough at first, and and I squirmed, and I had really uncomfortable times, and really, really like that whole stinking thinking about leaving, and I know better, but I hung on. And there's this one experience there with the executive director. His name's Keith. You know him. I sat in his office, and I looked at him, and I said, will you please just call my family and tell them to forget about me and just let me go? And I didn't want to go and get high. I just wanted to walk out into the woods and just, like, naturally, I guess, just disappear.
Yeah.
And he looked at me, and at this point, we both have tears in our eyes. And he looks at me and he says, we're not going to do that, Tyson. He said, we're going to love you until you can love yourself. And I was so angry at him. But ultimately, that's what happened. The secret in the whole thing isn't these awesome new age modalities. The secret in the whole thing was just loving somebody and being patient enough to let them struggle and not go and save them when they're uncomfortable, and continuously every day to show up and lead by example. And it was a turning point. Like, by the time I got there, man, I was hitting on all cylinders. I was going to 10 meetings a week. I would have gone to more. I had a sponsor during that time who actually told me I needed to take Wednesdays off. Like, you don't go to meetings on Wednesday. You need to go and take care of yourself, because you're going to too many meetings, too much service, too much stuff. That's where I came from a place of like, 12 step is bullshit. I don't want to do this stuff. These old guys, they're always angry.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a complete 180 to where I drank the Kool-Aid or whatever you want to call it, but my life changed and I never looked back. I didn't literally never even considered doing something other than what I was doing. It was just, this is the way.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I was woken up, and all sorts of things started to happen. I started to get closer to that place of accepting who I am. And that came through helping people. So I knew that there were big plans for me. I don't know what they were. I just knew my whole life that I'm supposed to do something. I just don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. And when I went through this process and came out on the other side of it, it was very, very clear to me that my mission in life is to just help people. And I didn't know what that meant. I just knew it meant to help people.
Right.
And so it started with sponsorship. It started with being very active in a 12-step community. And it eventually led to, treatment center that said, hey, if you want a job here, we think that you could maybe do some good. And I got an entry-level position at the center that I went to.
Yeah. Where I worked.
Where you worked.
And, it's funny because we didn't cross paths really until, I guess, I started doing this aftercare group in Florida with all these guys who I think you had been in treatment with. Mm-hmm. And they would come to this group and they'd talk about Tyson, who was on the loose at this point, and then, at some point I started hearing that you were back up there and then the next thing you know, you're working there. Yep. I mean, it's just such a trip when you get from sober and then but you get sober and you just watch people go through this stuff and change, and I'd heard about you, those guys loved you, man. And they were worried about you and wanted to help you. And I think one of them you ended up reaching out to. You might've lived with one of them if I remember right. Mm-hmm. But, and then I think you and I crossed paths once before you went back to Tennessee, but yeah, it's just been so cool to watch this all happen. And also just to see what you're doing now with Ardmore, to see you you're at a place where you're doing your thing. Like you found what you want to do. You had a vision and you're carrying it out. What's that been like?
What a trip. It's actually, as you're saying that, I'm still sitting here and I'm like, how did this all happen? I wish I could give you the answer. I can give you the details of how we got from there to here. But if to summarize it, I would say, I tried my best to do what was right in front of me. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that was very, very clear and sometimes it wasn't. And I struggled along the way, but about 2.5, next month will be 3 years. I had gotten to a point where I traveled a lot for work, working in treatment, and I was at Love Field Airport in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And my dear friend who we had been kind of ships passing in the night as far as being in treatment and working in treatment and all that kind of stuff, he called me and he said, I've been doing this thing, like running my own business, but it doesn't bring me joy. And when I look back on my life and think, when was I joyful? He said it was when I was working in treatment, when I was working with other guys, when we were getting those guys and scraping them up off the street and trying to help them. And he said, would you be interested in trying to start something? And I said, sure, it sounds great. It was, this is going to be awesome. And it was kind of a pipe dream. It was like, we talked about all this, how it would be and what it might look like and what the programming would be like. And then I, kind of thought, well, it's kind of a pipe dream. And I was excelling in my career and kind of didn't really give it another thought. But a few months later, we talked again and we started to create. We basically went down. I'm blessed because Gerard Denny, who's my business partner, we're like the yin and the yang. I'm more of the feeler type and he's more of the research type. He's very analytical. And so with his abilities to come in. I mean, it's just a godsend, man. And for the way that he came into this thing and said, here's a list of what we need to do if we really want to do this. And we just started going down the list. And we had setbacks where we were on the phone in tears, like, dude, it's just not meant to be. Like, it's okay. If God wants this place to happen, it's going to happen. If he doesn't, it's not. And there's nothing we can do about it either way.
Right.
All we can do is what's right in front of us. And one thing led to another, and we had put some money down on the property. We decided on Savannah because we wanted to be near the water. We wanted to be somewhere coastal. We didn't want to be in Florida. And ultimately, for construction costs, Georgia made the most sense, and we just kept coming back to Savannah and fell in love with it. And we had some property, and we went through the whole course through the city council and getting inspectors to come out. And ultimately, it fell apart because of the proximity to a saltwater marsh, which basically meant that the area below ground was also protected. So we couldn't go down. We could only go up, which is an issue if you want to put a septic system in.
Right.
And so that was kind of like, well, it wasn't meant to be. It's okay. And then he called me and he said, I found this property. And he said, before you say no, because I was adamant about we got to build from the ground up. We've got to build the suit, not try to take something and convert it. He said, before you say no, just come out and look at it. And I walked on the property and I just said, wow, this is it. I didn't even step foot inside the house. I was like, this is it. Like, we can build whatever we want to, but what we can't build are 250-year-old oak trees. We can't build that, Yeah. And so that began this whole process. And it was, I can't even begin to tell you, between the zoning board, the city council, the neighbors that we have that are, they're pretty far away, but they're still, our property is adjacent to theirs. And it really kind of, I had to take a step back, because one of the first things they asked us was, are you going to have ankle bracelets, like GPS ankle bracelets on them? And are you going to put barbed wire fence up around the property? And I was like, whoa, what do these people think we're trying to do? Yeah. They heard terms and they did their own Googling. And, if you Google the treatment industry, you're one click away from some terrifying stories.
Right. That's true.
So anyways, one thing led to another, and we eventually got the community members on board with what we were doing. And we told them and the whole thing with this whole process, we have stayed true to the course of being transparent and being ambassadors of a 12-step recovery person. So we probably I don't say wasted, it probably cost us 9 months to a year by doing that. But at the end of the day, when we passed our final inspection, we could hold our heads high, knowing that we did not hide a thing. Right. We did everything above board. We did everything transparent. We had some trees that were dying that we had to cut down on the property. But before we cut them down, we brought city officials out and marked them and got permission and permits to cut them. We're in a forest in the middle of nowhere. We could have cut them down. It's no big deal. Right. But we just try to stay true to that. And the whole guiding principle the whole time was like, if we start to violate principles, then this just becomes another thing. It just becomes a business. And that's not what we wanted to create. So we closed on the property back in February. And we also made the decision early on that we didn't want to take on any private equity or investors. We wanted this to be ours. And so we went through a bank and got a small business loan, an SBA, which I would not advise anybody doing. It is a nightmare. I'm talking about I'm not married, but I'm sure when I get married that my wife will know less than this bank does about me, because it is just so deep diving. And then it's just a pain in the butt, but we did it. We got through it. And there were so many things that we had to do to create this place. There were so many problems that we had to solve on the fly, but ultimately we got it. We closed on the property. And then that began the big process. And that was, we gutted it's 20 acres. There's 3 houses, and we gutted all 3 of them. One of the first walkthroughs that we did, we went and checked the plumbing, and there was some faulty plumbing lines in there. So we had to replumb the whole house, all 3 houses. Wow. And this was, at this point I had put in my resignation with my former employer, and they were well-wishers, and they, the Cumberland Heights are stand-up guys there that, they had my back. They were sad to see me go, but at the end of the day, they said, we work at Cumberland Heights for these kinds of things to happen.
Right.
And cannot applaud those guys enough. Class act. So I left there and came down to Savannah. And for the next 4.5, 5 months, I put a tool belt on and had a shovel and a pickaxe and a hammer and a drill, and we tore this place down and built it back up. And let me tell you, my business partner is one of my best friends, and we're not naive to the fact we knew when we were getting into this that this is going to be challenging on our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been. There have been times where we wouldn't speak to each other for a day, and we're working side by side, not speaking to each other. Right. And the beautiful thing about it is one of us always, it was never more than 24 hours, one of us would always come to the table and practice those principles in all our affairs. Of, man, I was wrong in what I did. And I think that stuff kind of, I feel like that stuff is in this building, is in the ground, because we stayed true to the course. And he probably thinks I'm crazy because I'm the type of guy that gets up to a traffic light and says, it feels like it should be right, so I turn right, even though it's probably left. I could use my GPS,
Yeah.
He's the type of guy that has it all plotted out beforehand. And so the yin and the yang there of us being able to do this thing. And we passed our final inspection on Friday. I think it was Friday. It was September 20th. And my part Gerard was going to the city hall to get the official certificate of occupancy printed, and I was on my way to the airport to get our first client.
Wow, that's so cool.
What a whirlwind! I was like, most of the time I didn't think we were going to make it.
Really?
But you just get up and suit up and show up, and it's different because every day you're doing like manual labor.
Right.
So when you bought these windows and you go to install them and you realize you were a quarter inch off, your natural feeling, you just want to quit.
Yeah.
And both of us were there to pick each other up.
Were they too big or too small?
They're too big. It was measured. Actually, they weren't neither. They were measured vertically, and they needed to be horizontal. And there was a lot. Like, Tom, I have no experience in construction. The closest thing I have is landscaping.
Yeah.
And
which
here
is
I am,
not
like,
close.
No, nowhere. I mean, it's just outside. That's the similarity, right? They both take place outdoors.
Yeah, sometimes you use a shovel.
Yeah, exactly. And luckily, he had some experience doing this stuff. But there were some times where, we sat up at night till 10 o'clock watching YouTube videos on how to do something, and then came up here the next day and rented the equipment and went and did it.
Yeah,
and
that's
literally
so cool.
Blood, sweat, and tears in this place, And it was there were days where it dragged out, where I didn't think we were going to make it, and then sitting here today and thinking like, man, this is ours.
Mm-hmm.
Like, more than just the program or the concept, like, this is ours.
It's funny you mentioned the YouTube thing, because that's this podcast.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I Googled practically everything and I figured it out and just did it.
Mm-hmm.
Where
Absolutely.
I know people who are spending thousands of dollars to have a coach wthem to do what I learned to do on YouTube.
Yeah.
Right? So it's wild.
It comes to that place of, where I came to this place personally and professionally where I was all the way up to the line and I just had to jump. And I had a lot of support and people that helped me take that leap. And ultimately it came down to this: I will never forgive myself if I take the easier, softer way.
Yeah.
You just got to jump in. And then, if it's supposed to happen, it will. If it's not, it won't. And it's okay. We'll be okay at the end. And that's what recovery taught me.
Yeah.
You can do this,
Yeah. And, that's again, that's what this podcast has been like for me. You've watched what I've done, and one day a job ended and I decided I wasn't going to get another one. And I figured it out. I've found a way to make ends meet and all that stuff. And it was the same sort of thing where I knew, it's this and a couple other things I'm working on as well, but I knew,
yep.
If I'm not going to do it now, when am I going to do it? Am I going to go get another job and tell myself that I'm going to wait until that runs its course, and why am I waiting? This is my life. I should be able to do what I want. And here's what I want to hear about from you is, how does that feel? to you compared to the way you felt before you took that leap? How do you feel now?
Like a lot of things in gifts in my life, the first feeling that comes up is I don't deserve this.
Mm.
You know, it's this like ultimate feeling of like to be so blessed or on the beam. So that's the first feeling. It's like, I don't deserve this. The second feeling is pride, and not arrogant pride, but like I know in my heart and in my spirit that what we're doing is pure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I've ever wanted, right? Cutting all the tape, working in treatment and seeing all the different things. It's like, is it pure? And my feeling with all of that is if we stay true to that, then we're going to be successful in whatever that looks like. Neither of us are going to pick piles of money. That's not why we did this.
Right.
But the success is that, like, laying my head down at night and thinking to myself, I'll tell you a quick story. We have a guy that's here, and the guy that's here has been in 16 different treatment centers. And I've worked with him in the past, helping him get into treatment. And he called me from treatment, and he said, man, I know that you're going out to Savannah to do this thing, but how do I be a part of it? Like, I want to be a part of it, but here's my situation. I've burned all my bridges. I don't have $1. And I told him, I said, man, I'd love to take you, but I don't even know when we're going to open. I'm cutting a driveway right now to lay water pipe underneath it. Like, we don't even have furniture.
Right.
You know, I'm gonna get like my first referral, and of course they're not paying anything. But I mean, like, I don't know what to do. And I mean, this is grace in its wildest form. Things fell in line, and he ended up going to the center that I went to, Still Waters, and Heath kept him there until we opened.
Oh my gosh!
And this guy came here, and he's so filled with gratitude every day for this chance. And we're sitting in a meeting, and he had just taken his third step. And of course, you know how it goes. The topic of the meeting is the third step.
Right.
And the way this meeting works is like they put tickets out, and then they randomly call numbers. So you just share. The share is totally random. And the last person to share is this guy. And I remember sitting there and hearing him share and realizing that, like, somehow we played a role in where he is today.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why we did it. If this place burns to the ground tomorrow and we never get another client, it's okay, because this is why we set out to do this, to give the guy that has nothing and nowhere an opportunity to do what we did.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so that's where I'm just glowing with pride, because of that, because that's what we're trying to do, you know?
Well, and you know what? He deserves it.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Just like you deserve to enjoy this, you know?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Cause you know, that part of us where the first thing that comes up is I don't deserve this. That's not true. And we grow through that, you know? But it's just, I mean, it's been so cool to watch you. You know, we've we've crossed paths a lot of times over the last few years and worked with some of the same guys who, you know, and just it's watching you get better and getting to watch other people get better. And sometimes when I think about the ripple effects of my life, I mean, it just blows my mind what has happened. You know, just because I got sober, you know, and started and took it seriously and started putting one foot in front of the other and did what I was supposed to do. And, you know, the next thing you know, like there is this army of people who, I mean, it's just amazing. And that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing. It's so cool.
Beyond the wildest dreams, you know, it's the bright spot in our lives. And it's like my idea of success when I got sober was like, I'm going to get a job and a family. I'm going to make all this money. I'm going to do all this stuff. And how that definition has changed, where it's like that inner kind of peace and pride and joy that comes from just doing what is in front of you. And there's not a material gift for it necessarily, but it's so much bigger than that. And it's hard to explain to somebody that's coming in here for the first time. It's like you look at somebody that's on day 3 and you're like, listen, if you do this one day at a time, you're going to help all these people. And they look at you like, I don't want to help anybody. I just want to not feel like shit, you know?
Yeah. It's so true because it's terrible. I mean, it's tragic, the stuff that we go through. And, yeah, man, it's just awesome. You know, I'm happy for you. And, you know, is there anything else you want people to know about Ardmore?
I think some people will ask about the name. And so the name is based off of some of the founders in 12-Step Recovery and what the street that he lives on. And that's kind of what we're founded in, is in that the principles of that 12-step movement.
I did wonder about that.
Yeah. That's where Ardmore Avenue is the name. It's in Akron, Ohio. Okay. I guess the biggest thing that I would want people to know is that, and you and I talked about this a little bit before, was that this whole thing, the secret to the sauce at Ardmore is that we love people, and we especially love drug addicts and alcoholics.
Yeah.
And the programming takes all sorts of twists and turns, but it's all built on that. And it's built on getting in the trenches with somebody and caring enough about them and holding them long enough for the magic to happen.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like.
Yeah, and you know, I know you well enough to know that, you know, when I want to send someone to a place, especially if it's a family member or someone I love, you know, I want to know that someone's going to be watching over them. Mm-hmm. And you think about the families that we deal with, their spouses, their parents. Mm-hmm. I mean, they've been through the ringer.
Yep.
And, you know, it's one of the things I experience is, you know, just the relief that they get when they find somebody on the other end of the phone who cares.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And,
it's the second best thing part of my day, besides talking to you, of course, is I spent about 45 minutes on the phone with this guy's mom. Mm-hmm. And he wants to stay here as long as possible. So we're looking at a 5 or 6 month deal. Mm-hmm. And she, not just her words, but the tone of her voice of just like, she's just so grateful, you know? And that's what it's about. That's the payment, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's about. And just exactly like you said. And, you know, she knows from day one, because I've been the point of contact for her. And she knows from day one that when I'm talking to her about her son, it's because I've been with her son all week.
Yeah.
You know, it's not because somebody told me how he's doing. Like, I know. I'm there. Right. I'm with him.
You had dinner with him last night.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. So how can people find out more?
So we have a website, and it's www.ardmorerecovery.com, and the website's a work in progress, but the information to find us is there. You can always reach me at tyson@ardmorerecovery.com. There's phone numbers on the website and that kind of stuff. And we specialize in guys that have been to multiple treatment centers and multiple slips and falls through recovery. So because of that, we believe that we've created a place where it's affordable, because most of the guys that are coming here don't have insurance or don't have any kind of funding. So we've got some creative ways to work around that and try not to turn anybody away.
Yeah. Well, that's great, man. Well, I appreciate you doing this, Tyson. And,
pleasure is all mine.
And you know, it's, I guess I feel kind of funny telling you I'm proud of you, but I am, you know, I mean, it's been awesome to watch, and, you know, keep doing it, man. And I can't wait to get up there. I love Savannah anyway. I can't wait to get up there and see the place.
You come on in, you put you up, tell your story, run some groups.
That'd be great. I'd
try to convince you to stay for a while.
Well, maybe, we might be able to work something out.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks, man.
Thank you.
for listening to The Path to Authenticity. If you'd like to learn more about our guest, you can find links in the show notes or visit our website at thepathtooauthenticity.com. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, if you have a suggestion for a topic, or you know someone who would make a great guest, email the show at thepathtooauthenticity@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you know someone else who would enjoy the show, or even just a particular episode, please share it with them. Every little bit helps. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider becoming one wherever it is you choose to listen. You can find the show on Patreon, where by becoming a patron, you can hear episodes before they're released publicly. You can gain access to supplemental content. There are other benefits in the various tiers. Visit patreon.com/thepathtooauthenticity. Join our Facebook community or follow the show on Instagram, both at The Path to Authenticity. We also have a YouTube channel. You can connect with us on Twitter or Pinterest. To hear the songs from this and every episode, you can find the Path to Authenticity playlist on Spotify. Obviously, there are a lot of ways you could be spending your time, so I appreciate you spending some of it here with me. I'm Tom Gentry. Thanks for listening. Be nice.
Great, honeybee.
The Path to Authenticity is powered by Equivox. For digital marketing and web design services, visit equivox.com.